UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we could see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be merging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just one or two showers around. But then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down though as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps four, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good evening. This is Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. With a momentous week, we have done our very best to build a momentous show for you. We have the return of Andrew Doyle. We have Katie John Wendt on the impact on the trans community. We have Fraser Myers on two-tier policing. We have Fiona McAnena from Sex Matters on the acknowledgement that sex matters. We have Connie Shaw and Benjamin Butterworth on the varied response of Wednesday's Supreme ruling. On young people, we have Jean Hachet talking about what happened to her when she tried to fly a suffragette flag at a Sheffield protest yesterday. The footage will shock you. And we have some comedians answering some crazy culture developments from a live studio audience, so there's going to be some laughs too. But first, the news with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you and a very happy Easter Sunday. From the newsroom, the top story at 7 o'clock. The US says it's pushing for a full and comprehensive ceasefire in Ukraine as Russia's one-day Easter truce is set to expire in just under 3 hours' time. The Kremlin announced no plans to extend it, though, after both sides blamed each other of breaking the 30-hour pause in fighting just hours after it began. President Zelensky says Russia never stopped its assault operations and that there's been no let-up in artillery fire. He's accused Moscow of trying to create a false illusion of peace. But the Kremlin claims Ukraine violated the truce more than 1,000 times. Meanwhile, RAF Typhoons have been roaring into action today over the Baltic, intercepting 2 Russian aircraft in back-to-back missions from a base in Poland. It's the first scramble since British jets were deployed under Operation Chessman as tensions mount near NATO airspace. The interceptions highlight growing fears over Russian aggression as the UK has vowed to defend NATO's eastern flank. This time, Britain's flying alongside new ally Sweden, with more joint patrols expected. RAF crews carried out 50 similar intercepts just last year alone. Staying with international news, and Israel's military has admitted it mistakenly killed 14 medics and a UN worker in Gaza, blaming what it called an operational misunderstanding. An internal probe reveals the convoy was clearly marked with emergency lights, but troops opened fire thinking they faced an imminent threat. Video found on a medic's phone captures his final prayers before gunfire erupted. The Red Cross says it's outraged, and Israel has dismissed tonight a top officer and claims some victims were Hamas members without, though, providing proof at this stage. It's the latest deadly error in what the IDF is calling a chaotic combat zone. Here at home, Ed Miliband says the government will double down on net zero, accusing opponents of nonsense and lies and warning of climate breakdown if the UK backtracks. He says the shift to clean energy is vital for jobs, social justice and national security, especially after soaring gas prices. But unions and political rivals warn the plans put thousands of oil, gas and steel jobs at risk. Among them, Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, who is calling the policy net zero lunacy and says it could become the next Brexit. But Mr Miliband insists green power will create good jobs and protect working families from any future energy shocks. Police are investigating tonight after 7 statues in Parliament Square in London were defaced during a trans rights protest yesterday. Graffiti was sprayed across the memorials as thousands gathered following a Supreme Court ruling on the legal definition of a woman. No arrests have been made so far, but officers say the damage was senseless and unacceptable. Specialist teams will be brought in to clean up the monuments, and the Met Police is also reviewing signs from the protest and urging anyone with footage to come forward. Sports news tonight, and contrasting scenes at the King Power Stadium. Jubilation for the Reds, but heartbreak for Leicester, relegated now from the Premier League after a 1-0 defeat to Liverpool. It's their 23rd league loss of the season so far and sees them drop to the Championship with still 5 games to play. Liverpool now, though, 1 win away from securing the Premier League title. And a dad from Southampton has gone viral for cracking into luxury Easter eggs, all to expose just how pricey chocolates become. Billy D'Souza's TikTok reviews show him smashing open eggs worth up to £225, rating them for taste, value and wow factor. He spent more than £500 across 2 years, but says it's not about showing off, it's about helping people spend smarter. And the leftovers, well, they're given to schools and families in need. And with some eggs rising by more than 125%, Billy says it's never been more important to know what you're really getting your money for. That's it from me for this evening. I'll be back with you in around an hour's time. Very happy Easter. See you soon.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. This is a show where we cast our gaze across the spectrum of culture, current affairs and politics, and inject a bit of common sense where things have become senseless. On the show tonight, after a momentous week for women's rights, I'll be catching up with a friend of the show, Andrew Doyle, to dissect the Supreme Court ruling that trans women are not women. I'll also be joined by a woman who was certainly celebrating this landmark decision and has been campaigning for years, Fiona McKenna from Sex Matters. Gender-critical campaigner Connie Shaw will also be joining me in the studio to see how young people have been reacting across the country, including exposing some pretty nasty incidents that happened at trans rights protests this weekend. And a report by a group of MPs has ruled that claims of two-tier policing at the riots following the Southport attacks were baseless. Fraser Myers joins me in the studio to discuss this. And, of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. Welcome, please, to my guests this evening, Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. Welcome. Welcome. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter,
Nick,
indeed,
happy Atheist Day.
Chocolate Egg Day.
Chocolate Egg Day, yes.
I've been dragged into work. I could have claimed I should just stay on holiday, right?
Oh, this is a hate crime.
Yeah, yeah.
Mate, I worked Passover last week. I worked.
I didn't even mention it. I'm mentioning it now, live on air. I thought this is the best time to resolve my contract.
You're a big man. Did you have some chocolate eggs today?
You can't in this game, Josh. You can't. I'm trying to lose weight, not gain it.
You can. The secret is to do up your button.
Oh yeah.
I went a little bit
Unless
crazy.
you hit the stage where it won't do up, that's when you can't eat the eggs.
Fair enough. Well, look, let's have some questions. Our first question is from John.
Are the Muslim rape gangs a false right-wing narrative?
Yes, are the Muslim rape gangs a false right-wing narrative? This is background to this is MP Ayub Khan called the grooming gang scandal a false right-wing narrative, claiming it's used to fuel division and Islamophobia. He stressed all abuse must be condemned, but not racialised. Critics accused him of downplaying very, very serious crimes, of course. This is not helping move things forward.
Yeah. Sorry to go straight into my nerdiness. Normally I wait for a while and build this up. But there's a thing called, I think it's Graham's hierarchy of disagreement. And the way you disagree with someone, top of the pyramid is to say, I disagree with your point. But lower down, the cheaty ways, like, I don't like your tone, I question your motivation for saying it. This is what this is. It's instead of addressing the issue, like, if you want to know if it's all a false narrative, was anyone raped? Yes, then it's not a false narrative, is it? But to say, oh, well, the reason you're bringing up is due to this malign reason, therefore I don't need to argue the point. No, there's a thing right at the top of that pyramid. There's an issue that needs dealing with. And stop pretending it's only being brought up to do you harm.
Yeah, I mean, this is deferment upon deferment upon deferment, right?
Yeah, it's disgusting. You've got the actual crimes, which are atrocity almost beyond imagination if you read the court transcript, talking about the rape and torture of thousands of children. And then you've got the sort of organised cover-up, the authorities covering things up, and then you have the general culture of denial, which this is part of, where someone can say it's a false narrative. It makes me so angry. I mean, last night it even made Paul Cox angry. That's how bad this is. It's about as horrific as it gets. You think you should be ashamed to even talk about it, but not that. They're trying to suppress it further. I find that stunning. And if he's talking about the racial element, well, there is a racial element. There's a religious element. These girls were treated as somehow subhuman, partly for racial and religious reasons. Sorry, that's just the truth.
But it's just accusing of things of far right is what's unfortunately has sort of actually led to more crime when this stuff was first raised.
Yeah. And the thing that's really distasteful about this particular story that we're talking about is what it's done in the old drama triangle. He's gone from, like, oh, some people were raped and I'm somehow the victim that it's been mentioned. That's cheap. That's a level of hypocrisy that just winds me up too much. I'm becoming like Paul Cox. I'm getting angry when normally I'm really chill.
Yeah, you've changed since joining this channel.
Yeah,
but in a good way.
I think we all have. Right, let's get our next question from Gavan. Hey, Gavan.
Yeah, good evening. This is a bit of a weird question, but was Winston Churchill the true enemy
The villain, the true villain, yes, was Winston Churchill, the true villain of the Second World War. So this is a faction of American conservatives is revising Winston Churchill's legacy with figures like Darryl Cooper calling him a villain of World War II. This revisionism, fueled by isolationist views, has gained traction on platforms like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson's shows. Douglas Murray warned these ideas distort history and downplay Churchill's role in defeating Nazi Germany. Douglas Murray has been doing a sort of media blitz this week with his book. I'm halfway through it. It's excellent. I don't own a garden, but I was away for a couple of days and I got to sit outside and read some of it, and that's why I'm a little bit burned and sweaty.
Bus stop, was it?
Yeah. But he has dealt with the criticism that he has received from people of basically pointing out there's an hypocrisy here. And, of course, there's also been this creation of the term the woke right, who seem to be like this sort of mirror image of the woke left.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of going on Joe Rogan's podcast and actually holding that to account. Good. It was nice to see, saying, why do you have people on with views, including this, which do seem a little bit crackpot? And he comes up with a really good reason, doesn't he, when he explains, this is step one in managing to somehow flip everything round so the West the bad guy again, and look what you can do to the West then. Yeah, I mean, I agree with his analysis.
Yeah, what about you, Nick? You're woke, right, aren't you?
Apparently, according to some, I imagine. I think the term's stupid, but I totally disagree with it.
A woke right person would say that.
Presumably they would. It's a circular narrative, isn't it? But, yeah, I think the term is lazy, unintellectual, but OK. This whole debate is very complex. Douglas Murray went on the Joe Rogan podcast, debated with Dave Smith, and they both had points. I mean, Murray's saying, you're not an expert, should you be talking about it this much? The problem with that is, and he was saying to Rogan, why'd you have so many of these people on? You know, they're cranks. The problem with that is, in the past, Sam Harris accused Douglas Murray of talking to the wrong people. He was talking to Stefan Molyneux. He said, he's beyond the pale, you can't speak to him. And Murray said, I just speak to who I want. I find that a more healthy attitude. Now it seems to me Douglas Murray, he's the expert now. He's the credential one. Now he's sort of punching down and saying no one else can speak. He's not strictly saying they can't speak, but it's that kind of thing.
I think he just says that I think the point he made very clear, and he's made clear since, is he's just saying that to provide no pushback to these revisionist narratives are damaging.
Yeah, in the end, it came down to, why don't you just have more people from the other side, for example, the pro-Israel side or the pro-Ukraine side? He felt Rogan was sort of platforming the other people. And that's fair enough, just put some of those people on there. But what I thought Rogan was correct was, he's always booked his podcast instinctively based on just who he thinks he should have. And that's what's made it so big. If he now starts to second-guess himself and think, I'm too powerful now, so I better be careful, I think that's the wrong approach. Though I will concede, there is an element where the podcasts have replaced the legacy media, but now they're becoming a bit sloppy. So the problem with legacy media is it just lies. It's flat out fake news, right? But the problem with the podcast...
Some true news.
Yeah, well, we are. But the problem with the podcast is that they can become lazy. So it's actually an opportunity for the old media. If they want to be taken seriously, they can have more rigorous fact-checking and they can actually start telling the truth. Whether they can do that, I don't know.
Well, BBC should do something like create a service that verifies, like they can call it BBC Verify.
Crazy idea. It'll never work.
But the podcasts are living in an ecosystem where they have to chase, effectively, clicks. They have to do something that gets a clip that goes viral. So I think it's not just laziness, it's also, you know, if you say something boring on a podcast, no one's ever going to hear it. So you will end up going to the slightly further extreme point of view. But this event in itself is the correction. So I don't think it's like, you should book more people. No, he did. Someone went on there and questioned the narrative that was being discussed on the podcast. So actually, that's the correction. Yeah. That's the win. Tick.
I know what you mean. I've seen your podcast on circuit boards. It is quite...
But you should get someone on who just doesn't believe that circuit boards exist.
Oh, Lewis. Yeah, I'll get him back on.
Right, our next question is from Chris.
Hi, Josh. Is Trump bad for science?
Yeah, this is actually a good one for Steve here. Is Trump bad for science? This is Seth Rogen's criticism of Trump's science policies was cut from the Breakthrough Prize broadcast. He blamed wealthy donors for backing Trump, saying it hurt US science. Organisers cited time constraints for the edit. It seemed like it could be that he was telling a joke. Of course, you're the science guy, but do you think that what he essentially said was Trump has destroyed all of American science?
Yes, I mean, that's the problem. It was hyperbolic. He's not destroyed all of science. I'm not sure he's good for science. It's a free speech issue, or I guess that's why this show's called that. And he had the right to say it, but free speech isn't the same as insistence that something stays in the edit. So I don't see a problem with editing it out. It's been talked about now, so the words are out there. It's not as if he's somehow been shut down and silenced by not having his science-adjacent joke included in a broadcast.
I guess the thing is that this, Nick, was financed partly by people who have actually came out and donated to Trump in the end, seeing which way the wind was blowing. And this doesn't reflect probably very well on them. The whole point for them was to stay in Trump's good books. and then you have Seth Rogen coming out and doing that.
It might be that. I mean, I think Seth Rogen should be cut out of most things. He was good in those films back when he just used to smoke weed and everything. And then we heard all his opinions. We're like, can you go back to the silly films? I mean, there is a point. I mean, I've heard this on Trump's attacking science. I'm not totally convinced. He is attacking like un-American values in places like Harvard, admissions that are sort of racist admissions policies, for example. He's attacking things like that. He's attacking DEI. He's attacking anti-Semitism on campuses. So I think there is something in that. Because remember, Harvard, everyone's like, oh, poor Harvard. They have an endowment of $53.2 billion. This is more than the GDP of about 100 countries. This is more than the GDP of Jordan. So they're not like this terrible little victim. But it's a shame because it's a sort of internal war in America. But if they're not upholding American values, I say it's sort of fair enough.
But couldn't you punish the universities by cutting the money for arts and humanities and things that no one needs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for that as well. I don't mind.
Well, also they were cutting things like making mice trans, which turned out to be... Well, it was.
No, it wasn't.
No, when they did,
the
they
word
went
was
back.
Transgenic.
But there was something else to it.
But it was... but the word that Trump saw and was like, oh, I see trans, in the same way that, you know... I can't think of it.
Yeah, but then they went back in. But then part of the meaning was it was about changing their...
Well, one of the genes you could change would be that. But this was transgenic, changing genes. That's what we do. Look, you don't grow an ear on the back of a mouse without messing with its genes a little bit.
Steve, leave the mice alone. I've seen your shed.
Did you...
I know it goes up.
Quiet, because they can hear really well.
Did you see the French university putting out the call for scientific refugees or asylum seekers to come to...
Again, that got more news coverage than it should. They opened the doors to all the poor refugee scientists, and there were 20 spaces. That'll help.
All right, well, thank you very much for your questions there. Coming up on Free Speech Nation, what influence did campaign group Sex Matters have on this week's landmark Supreme Court ruling? I'll be joined by Fiona McKenna, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, and the return of Andrew Doyle. This is Free Speech Nation.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day.
bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It has truly been a historic week for women's rights. The Supreme Court has unanimously ruled that the use of the terms women and sex in UK law and under the Equality Act of 2010 refers to biological sex, meaning that trans women are not women in the eyes of the law. This follows a long-running legal battle between the Scottish Government and Campaign Group for Women Scotland. I am delighted to say that friend of GB News, originator of the show, comedian, writer, mentor, Andrew Doyle, joins me right now. There he is.
Hi, Josh.
Hey,
good to see you.
Happy Easter.
Yes, happy Easter to you too.
So, this has been a pretty momentous week.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, it's been what a lot of feminists and women's rights campaigners have been striving for an awful long time. And thank goodness for Women Scotland, those 3 women who took on the state and won. It was so important that they were able to do this because, as you know, there have been all sorts of confusions about the Equality Act 2010. Lots of campaign groups, lobbying groups, people like Stonewall, Gendered Intelligence, various groups that go into schools and companies to teach them about equality law have been misinterpreting the law. They thought that in the Equality Act, when it referred to sex, it was referring to gender identity. And of course, it was referring, of course, to biological sex. That has now been clarified thanks to this action that 4 Women Scotland have taken against the Scottish Government, who had put out guidelines explicitly saying that sex in the Equality Act means gender identity, and they were wrong about that. What's really important about this ruling is it doesn't start a new law. It doesn't. We don't start from scratch. The law has always been this, and what that means is all of those campaign groups that have been advising schools and companies that there's single-sex spaces have to include people of the opposite sex who identify into that sex category, they have been incorrect. And so now there's going to be a lot of unpicking and things to do. That's going to be going on for quite some time because this is so deeply enmeshed in the system. It will affect prisons, it'll affect hospital accommodation. The NHS has been accommodating people by gender identity rather than sex for a long time now, and that has led to all sorts of trouble. As you know, we've had the Darlington nurses and the Sandy Peggy case in Scotland, where these women working for the NHS as nurses have been forced to undress in front of men, and these tribunals are ongoing. This ruling will impact those as well. It feels as though this will clarify absolutely everything in law. And one of the key things that I want to say here, and I think it's very important that people understand, this is being framed in a lot of the media as a debate about trans rights versus women's rights. It isn't that at all. Trans rights are completely unaffected by this ruling. This is about preserving women's rights and their right to single-sex spaces. Trans rights are completely unaffected, and that is a red herring to even sort of go down that road.
There's been a lot of misinformation over the last couple of days, misrepresenting, arguably, what the ruling means. I mean, you've summed it up, but what kind of arguments have you seen that run counter to what you're saying?
Well, a lot of trans activists, of course, have been misinformed for many years. They've been told that, say, if someone was born male and now identifies as female and has a gender recognition certificate, that they therefore have the right to enter women-only spaces like toilets, changing facilities, that kind of thing, even domestic violence refuge centres. That was never the case. So what has happened is a lot of people have been misinformed, perhaps willfully, perhaps not willfully, but either way, of course, you're going to get a bit of a backlash because a lot of people have been told lies. They've been told something that isn't true, and they feel, therefore, like their rights have been taken away from them with this ruling. But that isn't true. Their right, they never had the right to go into a female-only space. That right was not there. Trans rights are still very much protected insofar as discrimination against people under the category of gender reassignment is still very much protected under the Equality Act 2010, and that is something that the Supreme Court, in its judgment, in its ruling, was very, very clear about. So when you see, for instance, the campaigners, the activists yesterday vandalising statues in Parliament Square, urinating publicly, holding up placards that were calling for the deaths of women. Pretty repugnant behaviour, but they're reacting against a fantasy. They're reacting against something that hasn't happened. Their rights are still intact. It's just that now women's rights, and specifically as well gay rights, are now enforced, confirmed to exist within the Equality Act, within law. That's a really good it's really good news for anyone who is a genuine progressive.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on the point that you were making, and maybe in a slightly different way, the way that I see it is that this has been framed, certainly by trans activists, that it's the flip side of the same coin. And what this ruling basically says is that they are two different coins, and always have been two different coins. There's women's rights, that's one coin, and there's trans rights as another. It's not like they have to be in competition with each other.
No, exactly. And I don't think there was ever a situation where these rights had to be in competition, had to be locking horns. That, I think, is a major misunderstanding. That misunderstanding appears to be so widespread. I mean, right up to the top of government. I mean, we've seen just the other day these leaked WhatsApp messages among the Labour Party, where you've had senior members of the Labour government who now think that this ruling was catastrophic. Angela Eagle has said that this is a catastrophe for transgender rights. It's absolutely, I mean, that's factually wrong. The trans people have the same rights as absolutely everyone else. The complication came about because a gender recognition certificate created a kind of legal fiction. Nobody ever was suggesting that someone can actually change sex. It is a matter of incontestable fact that no human being has ever changed sex. That's just not something we can dispute. That's not even something the law courts can dispute. They can sometimes. In Australia, we had a judge recently in the Sal Grover case saying that sex is changeable, right? Well, it's not, no matter what a judge says. That's not something that can be disputed. But the creation of this legal fiction has led to all sorts of confusion. And so no wonder people are angry. But actually what this Supreme Court judgment does is it restores clarity to these debates. And we should be able to get on with a situation where anyone who identifies as trans deserves the same rights as everyone else. They shouldn't be discriminated against. The Supreme Court made that clear. But women's sex-based rights and gay people's sex-based rights are dependent on the recognition that biological sex exists. I mean, in Australia, it's currently illegal for lesbians to have their own gatherings, to gather without men who identify as women present. Well, no man can be a lesbian, right? So that's the trickiness. When the law gets involved with attempting to redefine reality, then we get ourselves in a mess. And what the Supreme Court has done, and I think this will filter out across the globe, the Supreme Court has clarified that, of course, this legal fiction enshrined in the gender recognition certificate doesn't actually change someone's sex. That's not possible. And therefore, these preservations, these single-sex spaces will now be preserved. There'll be a lot of arguing. There are a lot of people denying it. I saw an advisory body just yesterday, a school's advisory body, again misrepresenting the law in its new guidance off the back of the Supreme Court ruling. If schools follow that, then they will be breaking the law. And I think every company has to be very, very careful now about if they've taken advice from Stonewall and these sorts of groups that have not accurately represented the law, then they will lose this battle because it's now confirmed. And thank goodness for absolutely everyone. Everyone's a winner here. Trans people, they win because their rights are enshrined in that Equality Act. Women will win because they get their single-sex spaces back. Gay people win because they can gather and assemble without the opposite sex turning up. It just seems to me like this is good news across the board, and I don't think the controversy is actually reflective of the facts in the case.
Yeah, well, you mentioned anger there, but there are people who feel that this is catastrophic to their rights, who don't see the things the way that you do. Do you think that in time they will come to see the positive in this ruling, or do you think this unfortunately is going to continue, but it's going to just be rhetoric now because the law doesn't agree with them?
It's tricky because, as I say, for years you've had misrepresentations, and the truth is a lot of people just don't understand these issues. I mean, in the Labour Party, you've got people like Nadia Whittome, Lloyd Russell-Moyle was another one. I know he's not an MP now, but people like that, Alicia Kearns on the Conservative side. You've got these prominent politicians who don't understand the issues, who think that they're standing up for progressive values, and they're doing the precise opposite. They're promoting the idea that society ought to be organised according to gender identity, which is a metaphysical belief that is shared by very, very few, a tiny minority of the population. Most people don't believe in such a thing. And gay rights, as we know, is predicated on this notion that some people are attracted to members of their own sex. That is completely upended if you advance this notion that gender identity has to be the backbone to all public health policy and all sorts of other policies. So a lot of Labour people are actually advancing a very anti-gay, anti-women cause without knowing it. This is the real problem. them. Now, you've had Wes Streeting is a very good example, you know, Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who's come around to this. He now understands because he's actually read about the issues. He's spoken with people like Sex Matters. He's actually, like LGB Alliance, he's actually talked to people. He now understands the issues, and he's reached a sensible conclusion. We saw this with the implementation of the findings of the Cass review. But you still have politicians who don't understand, who are getting this completely backwards, and are have been gulled into promoting an anti-gay, anti-woman philosophy without understanding the issues. Now, what I would say to people like Keir Starmer and Nadia Whittome and all of those people who have said some ridiculous things in the past about this issue is they should sit down with Sex Matters, with For Women Scotland, with the Lesbian Project, with LGB Alliance, with all these groups that have done such incredible work, and just try to understand the issues. You know, these people have outlined them meticulously. If you go to the Sex Matters website, all of these details are meticulously outlined in painstaking detail. There's no excuse for Keir Starmer not to understand this. Keir Starmer has refused, by the way, to meet with Rosie Duffield, a woman who was driven out of the Labour Party, who couldn't even go to the Labour Party conference because of the threat she was getting on her life. She was right. She was right all along. And more, increasingly, members of the Labour government are coming round to this point of view, but there will still be these stalwarts, these diehards, who not only don't understand, but are determined that everyone else should have a misunderstanding of this situation. It's a really bad situation for the government to be in. So they really do now need to read the judgment, reflect on the judgment, read the work by campaign groups like Sex Matters, which is not bigoted, it's not transphobic, it's not anti-trans, it's not against anyone. It is simply reiterating the point that sex-based rights must, of course, incorporate the notion that biological sex exists. And it's strange to me that Starmer hasn't made more of an effort. He also, by the way, hasn't said that he's going to deal with this situation with his own party. You know, if you have WhatsApp messages, and I know it's early days, we don't know the whole story about this, but if there are indeed WhatsApp messages within the government saying, how can we mobilise and push back against this Supreme Court ruling, that is very dangerous territory. That is the government trying to undermine the law.
It's very hard to admit that you're wrong. Fortunately, I've never had to do so. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Doyle.
Thanks for having me.
Joining me now is the Diversity and Inclusion Facilitator, Katie John West. Katie. Hello, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us here. I went on your social media earlier and to see your position on this. It seemed very reasoned, and it seemed very much about where the trans community moves forward from this decision on Wednesday.
Well, yeah, we have to move forward. I do somewhat disagree with Andrew, but also quite healthily agree with him in parts. I don't think trans people are going to interpret it as, yes, their rights are protected. I think we still do have a weird policy, and to me, any trans person that tries to kind of reject biological sex is kind of, yes, they are living in fantasy land to some extent. Biological sex has always been biological sex. It's kind of not even O-level biology to actually, you know, confess what a woman is, what a man is. Obviously, we've had politicians running around in circles trying to avoid saying it. And I think we've had two things that have perhaps gone wrong, maybe it's not the right word, but two things that have happened in the last 10 years or so. One is we've erred on the side of inclusion, and what this judgment gives is greater permission to legitimately err on the side of exclusion. That's kind of one aspect. And the other thing is we've always had this kind of what I would call Schrodinger's sex, that, you know, nobody's sex exists until asked, and that somebody created this additional category of gender when realistically the only sex exists in legal sense. But we still, the thing is that I reread all 88 pages of it again today. That's the second time this week.
I tried to. In the end, I just read a summation. It's much easier.
Yeah, I know, because there's but it's very important because there's a lot of history in there going back to 1970 Corbett versus Corbett, April Ashley, whose marriage was, you know, dissolved on the basis that, you know, because she couldn't be actually a woman, even though she was living as a woman, because she couldn't actually be a woman, therefore her marriage in law couldn't exist. So sex is biology, it's obvious, and it shouldn't have been an issue. But how we incorporate, how we navigate society with people whose gender is lived differently, that goes back obviously to 2004, the Gender Recognition Act, which was kind of, you know, we had to put into to law because of judgments from the European Court of Human Rights, etc., and trying to fulfill human rights law. And one of the things that actually says, and the judgment last week actually said this relates to the definition of woman, within the Equality Act, etc. And I completely get that. However, the Gender Recognition Act still does exist, and it says that a person's sex, for all purposes, becomes that of the acquired gender. Now, yes, 2010 follows 2004, but there are aspects of the Gender Recognition Act, and Andrew was just saying transgender rights haven't been undone, they still exist. We still have Equality Act protections based on transition, and we still have the Gender Recognition Act. But how it has been interpreted is going to change, because, as I said, I think a number of organisations trying to be inclusive, trying to be kind, etc., have erred on the side of inclusion. But Baroness Faulkner said there's no obligation to provide single-sex spaces, but where you do, the presence of any trans person in them automatically makes them a mixed-sex space. And then the next day, Lord Sumption was saying, you no longer now have to include trans women, but nor are you obligated to exclude them. So it's no longer discriminatory to exclude trans in that sense. And he said, I don't think Baroness Faulkner is right. She responded the next day, softening her tone and dropping the mention of toilets. So I do think the interpretation of woman, which should be really simple, how that's played out in life is going to be a little bit messy in the coming months. We await statutory guidance over the summer. But yeah, it's going to be messy.
Well, and then perhaps we should have hashtag debate. And do you think that that's really what got us into this position? Was this inability that people lost their jobs, mostly women, for raising these discussions? They were called bigots, assaulted. And do you think now, I'm not saying, of course, the trans community is not some homogenous group, but do you think the trans community will get to a place where these conversations can actually happen, where it can, these fine conversations can be discussed now?
Have you met trans activists? So I've always been up for debate, and so I've been involved in various free speech kind of fora to actually debate all of these things, and I've always been available to discuss, but I'm classed as an outlier because I am willing to discuss these things, because I can say that biologically, yes, I'm a man, but also I have transitioned. There's some additional complications in my own backstory biologically, but I still know what a man is, and I'm not offended if someone, uses he of me. It's not my preferred pronoun, but actually I'm not going to force someone's language changes. So as I say, I'm an outlier in that sense. I don't think you're going to get the average trans person to suddenly sit down and have a calm conversation because they feel an existential kind of erasure. Now, I get that because I also believe that a lot of women over the last 5 to 10 years felt their language, their identity was having an existential erasure when people, again, erring on the side of inclusion, went too far and started changing their language and actually removing references to women in its obvious sense everywhere where it existed. And I think had we gone about that differently, had we done not no debate, but actually got involved in discussion and had respectful conversations and heard both sides, there might have been a different path forward through this. Because go back 20 years ago when I was first out sort of thing, there was a kind of, turn a blind eye approach. There was a kind of British tolerance, hey, not in a week, okay, we know you're trans, we know you don't pass, but we also don't see you on your own, one person kind of with a friend sort of thing, as a massive threat to us in that sense. But I do think there's been a media magnifying of isolated cases to make it look like we are now the same thing that was magnified in the 70s and 80s, the scary homosexual, in that sense. And
Katie,
I think
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but because I do not want to erase you. I want to be very clear about that. But I have been told in my ear that we do definitely have to go to a break. Also, I have to read a lot more books to catch up with you as well. Please, I hope you do come on the show again so conversations can actually happen, and that's how things move forward. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause, please, for diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Wendt. Coming up on Free Speech Nation, why are MPs still denying that there is two-tier policing? This is Free Speech Nation, only on GB News.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest holiday sun forecast. The uncertain conditions generally continuing for parts of Iberia and Italy over the coming days. But for the Canaries, apart from a few showers across the northern parts of the island, it should be fairly fine here. But back up into Iberia, France and Italy, some further showers. Some of these showers will be heavy, potentially persistent in places. But for a lot of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey, continuing fine and dry here, with temperatures for most here around the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You two met, I mean, since we last saw each other, then you two have done Strictly. And,
Yeah.
But the fact that and there's quite an age gap.
51 years.
51. And yet...
I'm his granny.
You're his granny. But the fact you clearly get on really well and you've stayed in touch and you've developed a real friendship.
We really do. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other. We speak most days, and Angela had this amazing campaign with Let's Dance, and obviously I was very, very much supporting that. And when you just get on like a house on fire, we just do. We get each other. We have great banter, and like you said, there's 51 years between us, but we feel like we've known each other for 51 years.
You have a particular interest in getting dance back into schools, don't you? I mean, your own experience of this, because your dad is a professional footballer, and you actually won a place, didn't you, into the football academy? It was sort of expected that you were going to be a footballer.
Yes, it was. I was expected to be a football player naturally because I was the eldest son, and Southampton wanted to sign me in the Premier League, and they still are, no, I chose to be a dancer, and it was because my dad and mum sent me to dance classes because I was very hyperactive as a kid. I was pretending to kick a football all the time. They sent me to my next door neighbour's dance school, and the class was called Tango Tots. I somehow ended up being a dancer and had to tell my Geordie dad when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dancer.
How did that go down?
It went fine. It's not like the film, not like the film, but it's very, 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 very supportive. And obviously the brother ended up being the football.
But you're very keen to get dance back into schools, aren't you? Tell me why.
I'm so keen, because for kids that can't afford it, why not just give them the opportunity to learn to dance? We live in a world today where we're on the phones, we're on TikTok, kids are learning to dance anyway, so why not regulate it and let them learn it in school for free?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah,
and now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
No, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A report by MPs has found that police forces were unprepared for the violence that broke out in riots following the Southport attack last summer. But they found no evidence of a two-tier approach. According to the Home Affairs Select Committee, claims of two-tier policing were baseless, unsubstantiated and disgraceful. Joining me now is the Deputy Editor of Spite Online, Fraser Myers. Fraser, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You wrote an excellent piece for Spike this week, which essentially lays into that report.
Yeah, this report comes in a long line of denialism, essentially, from the establishment about two-tier policing. I mean, we had, during the riots themselves, Sir Mark Rowley, Britain's most senior police officer. He actually grabbed the mic out of a journalist's hands, threw it on the floor when he was asked about two-tier policing. So it's something that's not only denied, but really fiercely denied.
Did anybody arrest him for a hate crime?
They should have done, perhaps. It's something that the establishment doesn't want to fess up to. So the way this report gets around it is by saying, well, these were very serious riots, and that's absolutely true. People were not simply protesting, they were attacking mosques, attacking asylum centres, committing quite serious violent crimes. Everyone can understand that. So, yeah, they weren't peaceful protests. But what you do have to look at is how to police other riots. And there were some riots only 2 weeks before those in Southport, and they were in Hare Hills, in a diverse suburb of Leeds. And when those blew up, essentially the police ran away. So there was
involved the Roma community.
It involved the Roma community. It was basically sparked when someone tried to take a Roma child into care, someone from the council. And not only did the police run away, let the riot burn itself out, allowing people to set fire to buses, overturn cars, cause chaos, cause terror to, you know, many people in that community as well. The next day, the local council put out a statement praising the Roma community for its diversity and richness, which is a very odd thing to say. So I think that suggests there might be perhaps people's ethnicity, people's culture probably is playing a role in policing decisions. Even in the middle of the Southport riots, as those were spreading, we saw a kind of counter-riot in Birmingham, and that was completely under-policed as well. So you had masked men running around with weapons. They were able to essentially menace some journalists who'd turned up. They slashed the tyres of a broadcast van. They even beat a man up. You can see the film of it. He ended up with a lacerated liver. No police turned up at any point during the day. They were even aware that people were going to turn up, and essentially the next day
with weapons.
Well, potentially they knew large numbers of people were going to gather there. They knew that they were worried about potentially a far right riot coming to their town, and they wanted to protect themselves. That would probably imply they were going to bring some weapons. But the next day, the sort of representative from West Midlands Police said, "Well, we spoke to community representatives and asked them how they'd like to be policed, and they essentially said they wanted to police it amongst themselves." And you're thinking, hang on, is that normal? Do people get to decide, do masked men with weapons get to decide how they're policed? No, it isn't. And I think what it shows is that we have a system of multiculturalism, basically, where the British state doesn't relate to us as free and equal citizens. We're seen as part of different ethnic or cultural groups. And sometimes, in the case, of Birmingham's Muslims, there are certain community representatives who the state relates to and talks to in order to understand how to implement certain policies. That's clearly a problem. That's clearly a recipe for a two-tier system and for inequality.
So it seems like this report deliberately framed it the wrong way, or the way that suited them to try and pretend that two-tier policing doesn't exist, by not bringing in these other examples. And there are more than that, and we've seen it over at least the last decade. Yeah. Even going back really to the rape gangs.
Absolutely.
Yet then they can sort of turn around and say, look, it is some far-right conspiracy because they're just focusing on this one little thing.
Well, exactly. They just say anyone who says...
Well, I'm not saying that was a little thing. Those Southport riots
were massive.
Terrible. Those people deserve to go to jail who committed crimes. But the point is that by pretending that other people don't deserve to go to jail, then they can sort of point to the fact, oh, we're doing a great job.
Exactly. I mean, there was a small fringe of people online who said the riots after Southport were merely protests. But that's not the mainstream view. That's not what the British public thinks. That, people wanted to... They saw the violence and they wanted the police to crack heads. And that's fair enough. That's a reasonable response to restoring order. But to deny that to pretend that that's how the police always respond in all situations is absurd. And as you said, there are so many other instances where I think an obsession with maintaining race relations or community relations, social cohesion, gets actually in the way of treating people equally, applying the law equally. And grooming gangs is merely the most grotesque example of that. Every single report you read, it's the police's fear of racism, fear of stoking up a race riot, things like that prevents them from actually tackling these crimes.
Yeah, I guess the point is, as always, that if the failure to acknowledge that there is a problem is just going to allow this problem to continue.
Well, exactly. And it is absurd for them to deny it's a problem because this is the way that politics has been done since the 1980s. So they're just in denial of their own policy.
Well, thank you very much. Fraser Myers from Spike magazine. Coming up later in the show, I'll be joined in the studio by Fiona McAnana, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. This is Free Speech Nation, only on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England. They'll ease overnight though, leaving some mist and fog patches here as we go into the early hours of Monday. Whereas out towards the west, the showers across Northern Ireland will start to make inroads across other western parts of the UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we could see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be merging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just 1 or 2 showers around. Then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So a wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down though as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. I want to get back to this week's Supreme Court ruling, and I'm joined now by journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. Benjamin, you've been a very vocal advocate for trans rights in the past. What did you make of this week's ruling?
Well, on the one hand, what it said was what was always in the Equality Act, which was that there was preservation for single-sex spaces. Harriet Harman, the politician who wrote it, had always said that.
And lots of people didn't believe that, though.
But on the other hand, I think it creates an absolute nightmare situation. Lots of people who celebrated the Supreme Court ruling felt that this was the conclusion of their activism, when actually it's the start of a real can of worms. Because the idea that the gender recognition certificate, the thing in 2004 which allowed you to legally change your sex, is now basically redundant because it means that people who've had a full operation, who've lived in their identified gender for decades, now, in theory, can't go into, for example, women's loo in the shopping centre. And actually, that is completely unenforceable, as well as the fact that what it really means is that someone who's transitioned in the other direction and now has male genitalia, has testosterone, might have muscles and tattoos, would have to go in the women's toilets. And I really don't think that's what people wanted.
Well, if those are the options, but it's not that those are the only options, of course, because there is this idea of third spaces. And now, surely, is the time to start having these conversations about how things move forward. Sex has been now basically solidified as biological sex. And now the question becomes how to best protect the trans community.
But it's basically impossible to go only on biological sex, because that means that all these people, for example, who look like women would have to go into the men's toilet, and people that look like men would have to go into the women.
Well, they could go to another toilet, though,
except
couldn't they?
That, actually, well, they could. What I think will happen, and this is the opposite of what the supporters want, is you will get unisex toilets in public areas. Now, I really don't like unisex toilets. I feel, obviously I am simply a man, and I I don't like being in the toilet with a
Look,
woman.
I've been in the toilet after you. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And we're the same sex. But I think this focusing on toilets is just like the other side of the argument always focuses on sport because it's the easiest way to see the unfairness here. But the point is now is surely that we can have these conversations from a cemented place of understanding, isn't it?
I think a lot of trans people, and I was with some just before I came here this afternoon at a queer cinema in Southwark.
Thanks for inviting me.
And they were, well, you had a whole audience to entertain you. But what they were saying is that they feel really nervous. They feel really terrified now. They feel concerned that they're going to be mocked and questioned and quizzed going about their basic day-to-day lives. And they don't want this attention. They don't want to have to be the subject of Supreme Court judges. They just want to get on with their lives. And, you know, you might think they look a bit unusual. In some cases, maybe they don't pass. But that doesn't mean you need to dictate where they use them.
We are going to talk about this in the next hour. Please come back for it. Thank you very much for joining me, Benjamin Button.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England. They'll ease overnight though, leaving some mist and fog patches here as we go into the early hours of Monday. Whereas out towards the west, the showers across Northern Ireland will start to make inroads across other western parts of the UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearest skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we can see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be merging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just one or two showers around. But then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down though as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We have a lot more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but first let's get a news update with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you at 8 o'clock exactly. The top story tonight, Ukraine's president has proposed a 30-day halt to Russian drone and missile strikes on civilian infrastructure. It follows a brief Easter truce declared by Vladimir Putin, which Kyiv says was broken almost immediately. Volodymyr Zelensky claims Russia launched over 46 assaults today alone, calling the ceasefire a PR stunt. Russia, though, denies breaching the truce, saying it repelled Ukrainian attacks and did observe the pause in fighting. Meanwhile, the government here at home has dismissed the ceasefire as a one-day stunt, backing Ukraine's calls tonight for a longer pause. Israel's military has admitted it mistakenly killed 14 medics and a UN worker in Gaza, blaming what it calls an operational misunderstanding. In an international probe, it revealed the convoy was clearly marked with emergency lights flashing, but troops opened fire thinking they faced an imminent threat. Video found on a medic's phone captures his final prayers before gunfire erupted. The Red Cross says it's outraged as Israel has dismissed a top officer tonight and claims some victims were Hamas members, but haven't yet provided proof. It's the latest error in what the IDF is calling a chaotic combat zone. Here at home, Ed Miliband has said the government will double down on net zero, accusing opponents of nonsense and lies, and warned of climate breakdown if the UK backtracks. He says the shift to clean energy is vital for jobs, social justice and national security, especially after soaring gas prices. Unions and political rivals, though, warn the plans put thousands of jobs at risk. Among them, Nigel Farage, who's calling the policy net zero lunacy and says it could become the next Brexit. But Miliband insists green power will create good jobs and protect working families from any future energy shocks. Scottish First Minister John Swinney has defended not inviting Reform UK to a summit on tackling the far right, saying the party's stance on immigration causes him enormous concern. He says all Holyrood parties were asked to attend, but Reform, which denies being far right, says the meeting is anti-democratic. The party's support in Scotland has jumped now to 17% since the general election. The party's Thomas Kerr said John Swinney had overstepped his mark by excluding them. The Scottish Conservatives are also boycotting the summit, calling it a talking shop. A murder investigation is underway tonight after a woman was stabbed to death in North London. Police were called to Enfield just after 7 o'clock yesterday after the 45-year-old victim was pronounced dead at the scene. Paramedics tried to revive her, but sadly the London Air Ambulance couldn't bring her back. No arrests have been made and a crime scene is still in place. Detectives are urging anyone with dashcam footage from the area to come forward. Free breakfast clubs are launching at 750 schools across England from Tuesday next week, offering thousands of families half an hour of free morning childcare. Ministers say the scheme could save parents £450 a year and give primary-age children up to 95 extra hours of care a year. It's part of Labour's plan to expand the offer nationwide, but teaching unions warn the funding may not cover costs. And head teachers say school budgets are already stretched and some may struggle to subsidise the shortfall. But the Department for Education says the clubs will help tackle child poverty and boost opportunities for every child. News on this Easter Sunday that Pope Francis made a surprise appearance at the Vatican Sunday service, blessing crowds in St Peter's Square earlier. There were doubts, though, over whether the 88-year-old would attend after a 5-week hospital stay for an infection that developed into double pneumonia. He was discharged just last month, but the pontiff was seen smiling and waving as he greeted thousands gathered in the spring sunshine. And also celebrating Easter today, the King and Queen. They were greeting crowds outside Windsor Castle after attending their traditional Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel. They were joined by Princess Anne, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Prince Andrew, who arrived with his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. But the Prince and Princess of Wales were notably absent, said to be spending the weekend with their children in Norfolk, with reports that the couple are prioritising family time ahead of the new school term. And get ready for a cosmic show. The Lyrid meteor shower is set to dazzle UK skies, peaking on Tuesday with up to 18 shooting stars every hour. Known for its bright fireballs, the Lyrids are one of the oldest recorded showers, streaking through the sky for nearly 2,700 years. They're caused by debris from comet Thatcher, which orbits the sun every 400 years. Clearer skies are expected on Monday night, giving stargazers the best shot at catching the display. That is, if you're not watching GB News at the time. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. Lots more still to come, but first we're going to get some questions from our audience. Our first question is from John.
Does the expression river to the sea relate to the English Channel?
Yes, so does the expression river to the sea refer to the English Channel? This is Jewish groups condemning a pro-Palestine march during Passover in Westcliff, Essex, calling it a hateful and provocative act. Protesters chanted "Stop killing children" near synagogues, causing fear among the local Jewish community. While some defended the protests as political, others saw it as a deliberate attack on the Jewish faith and community relations. Did you see any of... First of all, John, did you see any of this footage?
No, I didn't.
It was pretty horrific. There's Jewish families coming back from synagogue.
Perhaps it's appropriate that today is Hitler's birthday.
John, the fact that you know that terrifies me.
Did you get him a card?
Did you see this footage?
I've not seen any footage, no. I listened to the stories on the way in, so I never get to see the pictures in the stories. But we don't know which the river is, do we? I mean, we're now at the English Channel, so I don't know which river goes through. Thames, it goes near there. I don't know, Westcliff, I don't know what they've got going on there. But, look, would I prefer it if there were no protests? Of course. The sticky edge of this is if you start to have a situation where you can tell people when they can't protest, I don't know, then we start to...
Well, that's the law, though, is that we specifically have these laws so that people will go to the police in a certain amount of time...
And that's the flaw here, isn't it, that they didn't apply...
And they didn't do that, and thus
But that's not what the headline is it? If the headline was, this is a process that was not applied for properly, I totally agree. We have a system in place and it should be adhered to. The headline is like, look at the day it landed.
But, Nick, if they had applied... given the appropriate time, then the police could have said, wait a minute, this walk goes past 5 synagogues, there are families coming out of Shabbat services at exactly that time, which is what we saw in the footage. And then they'd go, OK, we'll do it at a different time or possibly a different route. That doesn't take away from their ability to protest.
Yeah, it all feels a bit late, doesn't it, when you're talking about organising protests. The problem, as Douglas Murray has said, is we have people in the country who hate us. We've brought in too many people. This kind of thing didn't used to happen. Correct me if I'm wrong. It never seemed to happen in the past. You know, I'm sure if you're a Jewish person, you had your own lived experience, to use that phrase, but I don't recall things like this happening so frequently in the past. So the country's changed, we've got multiculturalism, and it hasn't worked, but our ruling class doesn't want to admit that.
Fine. Our next question is from Tracy.
Are our churches safe?
Our church is safe, yes. So this is graffiti with offensive images was sprayed on St James Church in Leyland, treated as a hate crime. Despite the damage, the church held its Good Friday service and a wedding the next day. The local community offered support in the aftermath. Did you see any photos of this?
I didn't. I've kind of heard about it. But
I just realised I've asked that you might be sight impaired as I asked that question. So, to you, a hate crime did not occur.
I think one just did.
One just did. No. and we have the footage as well, which is amazing.
It's Easter. Forgive me. So, this is not good.
It's not good. The article says, and look at the day it was on, and I just listened to the previous article thinking, that can't be the argument. You can't have, you can't do bad... It's worse to do bad things on certain days.
I think it is worse to do bad things on certain days.
No, but the church is the thing. Don't graffiti a church. That's the hate crime part of it, if you want one, rather than the way they explain it in the article, saying, Easter. Surely, no, but there's never a good time to spray paint a church, is there? That's the way I'd view it.
I guess so, but I guess it just makes the offence that much greater. And then you had this wedding it affected their day, of course. It's a horrible thing.
Horrible.
We've seen churches being attacked, Nick, not just here, but across Europe.
I know, it's horrible, but I don't know who did it yet, so I don't know if it fits with my agenda. But it is awful. And it happened near Preston, and near where I'm from. We used to go to Preston when we wanted to go to a shop, because I'm from the woods, and that was a big... that was a treat for us, going to Preston. All right.
Do you think it might have been your mum?
No, but it's just sad that that's an area near where I'm from, to see it decline. I know that's my big thing, talking about the decline of the country. This is just another example, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this church is... I looked it up online. It does seem somewhat isolated. It's on the edge of a town. There's nothing to suggest... We have no idea who it is, and it may well have been some very stupid teenagers.
Yes, there's
coming
a
out.
chance, yeah.
Well, they exist. Our final question for the moment is from Peter.
Did anyone die due to communism?
Yeah, did anyone die due to communism? Thank you, Peter. The BBC bite-sized video on communism has been criticised for ignoring the mass killings under communist regimes. Critics argue it presents a biased, overly simplistic view of communism. Peter, how's your history of communism? Are you aware of the Gulag and the millions of people who starved?
I'm pretty much in my own little bubble.
OK, well, it happened. When we have BBC Bite Size, which is a very useful service in a lot of ways, my kids use it, but the omittance of information is the problem here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you think the original complaint should be like, well, how deep do they need to go into it? This is GCSE level. And then you think, GCSE, you might mention the death toll of the communism. That would be part of your discussion. If you've got to whip up an essay, communism for or against, you'd want this as your basic selection of facts to be able to throw in. The argument, the defence would be that it's not meant to be all of the notes that you use to teach this lesson. It's BBC Bite-Size for Teachers, isn't it, the subset that this is actually from. So I suppose you'd presume your teacher might have heard a bit about it. But it's a flawed...
Well, that's the point, is it seems like this is ideologically driven. The way that they described fascism applies to many communist states. They don't mention that. And the way they talk about capitalism, they were very happy to sort of lay into capitalism, but to sort of give communism a free pass. And this is what's going on to our children.
I know. There are critiques of capitalism include this and this. Critiques of communism, nothing. No, it's just absolutely great.
Too much red.
Yeah, they had it was like it's like a cutesy... I just got it here, just get it right. It's like a cutesy cartoon, and it talks about Lenin and the Bolsheviks. It says their slogan, peace, bread and land, struck a chord with Russian peasants. Oh, that's nice. I mean, it doesn't
like the bread idea, don't they?
Up to 700,000 Cossacks killed, apparently. Someone tried to correct me with kulaks. That was Stalin. That's later. The Tambov rebellion, the Kronstadt rebellion. There's all... Lenin killed like 1 million. This is before Stalin and all that, and the Gulag. So there's all... Unbelievable. This is the BBC. You just want them to be better, but they can't be, which is partly why we exist. But it's just like... They're just... At this point, the BBC is just full-on subversion.
You just give me a great idea for a new revenue stream for GB News.
Right.
GB News Education.
Education, yeah. But true.
For 5-year-olds.
Right, because this is aimed at 11 to 14-year-olds. Telling 11-year-olds communism was good. That's now the BBC. It's beyond parody.
Well, a BBC spokesman said, this is a bite size for teachers resource and clearly labelled for use by teachers, not for direct use by students. It is designed to be used alongside other resources and therefore is not a comprehensive summary of the curriculum area. There are other resources for teachers which cover the oppression and murder by communist regimes. Next on Free Speech Nation, what role did campaign group Sex Matters play in this week's landmark Supreme Court ruling? I am joined by one of the director of campaigns, Fiona Makanena. See you in a couple of minutes.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Can you find love in your twilight years? That's what we're asking this morning. Broadcaster Ryan Mark Parsons and former Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe join us now. Good to see you both this morning. Anne, let's start with you. Is 70 too old to date, do you think?
70 isn't too old for anything.
Oh.
Everybody ages at different rates, both mentally, physically, in the sorts of things they like. When you say to me, is 80 too late to, is 70, well, we might even say 80. It's too late to find love. The answer is just look around you. Lots of people have. But let me say right away, no, that's not an invitation. I've absolutely no ambitions in that area at all.
Ryan Mark, what do you make of it? Do we need to stop putting a bar on ageing and dating?
No, I don't think we should. I think once you get to such an old age, you really should be looking for love internally. I mean, you should self-love. I just don't see the point at 70 years old to be searching for love at that point. I think you should go on holiday somewhere. I think you should find love with the sunshine and a cocktail, perhaps, instead of looking for a man or a woman. I think at what point do you decide that, you know, love is not going to come around knocking on your door? And I think probably at the age of 70, that is when you should decide it's time to give up. I'm 24, living in London. I know how incredibly hard it is to find love. I don't know how anyone who has wrinkles and grey hair at the age of 70, over someone like me, could perhaps find love. I just don't think it's possible. I think it's a nice idea, but I think it's not feasible. And also, I don't think there's any point at that age.
The People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. One group who certainly celebrated the Supreme Court's ruling earlier this week was Sex Matters, a group advocating sex-based rights and free speech. It helped shape public debate and support legal cases, contributing to the Supreme Court's ruling that affirmed such beliefs are legally protected, marking a key moment in the UK's gender and equality law debate. While Sex Matters was not the legal party in the Supreme Court case, it played a significant role in shaping public debate, supporting related legal challenges and amplifying the voices of those with gender-critical views. I'm now joined by the Director of Campaigns for Sex Matters, Fiona McAnena. Thank you so much. It's sort of almost a shame that it has been framed as a victory, in that it's framed as that it's like some loss for trans rights, because that was never what it was about.
No, and I think Andrew explained this really well. What the judges have done is they've reminded everyone that when the Equality Act was made, it was very simple. There was a protected characteristic of sex, and sometimes that matters, and there was a separate protected characteristic of gender reassignment, and that's very widely drawn. So anyone who claims to be, in any sense, having a trans identity is covered by that. The problem is, of course, that that group overreached, and in the recent years, they have invaded single-sex spaces, and now the judges have said, you don't have the right to go there. You do have the right to be protected from discrimination. You do not have the right to be treated as if you've changed sex, because no one can change sex. And so there's a period of adjustment, I think, where people need to go back to what the law says.
Well, when you say period of adjustment, I agree. Institutionally, maybe that's a bit easier than many people who feel like they have lost something. Now, there are many trans rights activists who feel like this has somehow taken something away. The argument that I and others would say is the fact that it's seen that it's the reinforcement of women's rights, not even just the enforcement of women's rights, that would seemingly take something away from trans rights, would say what trans rights really was about in the first place.
Yeah, and we've seen that with the rioters out marching in the streets of London this weekend, that they've defaced statues, and they've particularly gone after the statue of Millicent Fawcett, and she stands for women's suffrage. She is a token of women's equality and women getting the vote. And so defacing that statue is a kind of way of saying we don't respect your boundaries, we don't respect women's rights, and it's very challenging. What we need to see now is some leadership from the politicians to say, actually, we've reset the bar now. Everyone has the rights they were always meant to have under the Equality Act. And if people don't like it, that they can no longer breach women's boundaries and go into women's spaces, they'll just have to put up with it, because the Supreme Court has spoken and there is no higher authority.
I just want to talk a little bit about the history of this case. It's For Women Scotland started it, and quite a long time ago now, right?
Yeah, they started this back in 2020. So the law that they challenged was actually passed in the Scottish Parliament in 2018. And they realised that it was basically saying that increasing female representation on public boards would be achieved if men who identified as women got on public boards. And so the For Women Scotland team said that's not OK. They've basically redefined what a woman is. They went through 2 rounds of hearings in Scotland in order to force the Scottish Government to throw away that definition and go back to the drawing board. But what then happened was the Scottish Government said, OK, we can't do self-ID, but we will allow anyone who's got a gender recognition certificate saying they're a woman to count towards these targets for women on boards. And so once again, For Women Scotland went to court. This time they lost in first instance. They lost at the appeal court in Scotland, and they very courageously said, right, we've got to take this to the Supreme Court. They had to apply for permission to do that. They were given permission. That was a good sign. The Supreme Court said, yeah, this needs looking at. And as we know, the case was heard last November and the result was declared this week. And the ruling could not be clearer. It couldn't be simpler. The judges have said sex in the Equality Act is a binary. It means male or female. That's all there is. And all of the exceptions that relate to sex, single-sex spaces and sports, lesbian associations, single-sex schools, all of those things relate to whether you're born male or born female. And having a piece of paper changes nothing.
So this was 5 years in the making to get to this point. And do you think it's as pivotal, more pivotal than Maya Forstatter's ruling a few years ago, that you were allowed to say that there are 2 sexes?
Yes, well, Maya's ruling was mentioned, actually, by the Supreme Court. They quoted a line from her judgment that said that the Gender Recognition Act does not compel people to express a belief in something they don't believe in. So that was when Maya won the right to say, I can see that you're a man.
And that gave people free speech.
And that, in theory, gave free speech, but that hasn't really happened as widely as we would have hoped. And what I think is very encouraging about this ruling is the attention it's had. I think this couldn't have happened without Maya's case. I think that this one now is getting so much attention, it's made it virtually impossible for the politicians to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing is that every time it has to be the courts that do the ruling that behave like the adults in the room, when what should have been very clear to the obvious and obvious to politicians, but they just weren't brave enough to actually take a stand for women's rights.
I think bravery is the key here, yes. I mean, there have been some brave politicians.
Rosie Duffield.
Yes, and also the Secretary of State for Health, Wes Streeting.
And Kemi Badenoch.
Yes, indeed. So we can find people across the political spectrum, but when the Conservatives were in power, they didn't solve this. Labour have been in power for almost a year now. They haven't solved it yet, but now the courts have solved it. So now they only need to find the courage to follow the ruling of the Supreme Court.
Well, let's see. What does it mean for your organisations, for Sex Matters? Now that it's now codified in law, yes, sex does matter. What are you going to be working towards? Was this the end goal, or is there...
Well, the big push now is we need to see the regulators, the politicians, decision makers, we need to see them step up and do their jobs. You know, for all these years, there are countless organisations that could have said, either clarify the Equality Act, or they could have said, we believe that single-sex spaces matter and we interpret that as being based on what you're born. And mostly they didn't. They rolled over. So now those organisations, the people who run the NHS, for example, people who inspect schools, all of those need to follow the Supreme Court ruling, recognise that it's pretty clear and pretty simple. And employers also have an obligation, and people have been afraid, because if you're afraid of losing your job, it doesn't really matter what the court says, you can't take that risk. And so really we want to see the people who make policies do the right thing and not leave it to individuals, brave people like Maya Forstater and like the women for Women Scotland. So the next month or two will be critical, because we'd like to see them step up and say, yeah, we're going to rewrite our policies to make things clear.
And do you think this changes the narrative? Because it seems it was so interesting, as you said, to see the publicity, to see the press scrum outside of the ruling, which we just haven't seen before. We haven't seen people like Ellen Joyce featured on TV shows, radio shows before. It feels like the dam has burst. And maybe now it's possible to have dialogue. I wonder if it now becomes, moving forward, and that when we're looking at these issues about where trans rights are, to try and identify what these rights are. And maybe then we can have a conversation. But I don't think that falls to women to have that conversation. I think now it falls, frankly, to men.
Well, I think there's been a vibe shift. I mean, it feels different. We've seen this ruling covered all over the world, and that's extraordinary. And as I say, I think that means that politicians can't ignore it. It is a ruling about women's rights, and yet a lot of the media response is to talk about about the poor trans people. That's disappointing, but we will keep insisting that our rights are properly respected, and then we can worry about, or they can worry about, the people who have rejected their birth sex and finding solutions for them. But in the first instance, this ruling is going to make a difference now, because we can talk about this and we can reclaim our rights.
And I think the thing is, a lot of the narrative is trying to two sides a fact. You can't two sides a fact, and now we have a fact in law.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also for your campaigning, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause, please, for Fiona McAnena. Next on Free Speech Nation, the Supreme Court ruling this week didn't exactly go down well with the younger generation. Will they ever move on? We're going to find out after the break. See you in a couple of minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest holiday sun forecast. The unsettled conditions generally continuing for parts of Iberia and Italy over the coming days. But for the Canaries, apart from a few showers across the northern parts of the island, it should be fairly fine here. But back up into Iberia, France and Italy, some further showers. Some of these showers will be heavy, potentially persistent in places. But for a lot of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey, continuing fine and dry here, with temperatures for most here around the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
From a PETA point of view, I see you guys are in the newspapers today, PETA, and it's about the definition of a rat. Have you seen this story?
Yeah, I have indeed. And, you know, rats are individuals. And of course, we want everyone to respect all animals. But one point I would like to raise is that, you know, we mention animals who are going extinct. There are over 2,000 species right now that are on the endangered list.
Well, rats
and there are
won't be one of them.
More. Well, you know, rats are important as well. But we're here to talk about, you know, the dire wolves. And it's important to point out that we need to think about what's going to happen to these animals once they're released back into the wild, because this is really complicated.
Yes,
and we need to remember that humans don't have a good track record of our treatment of wolves. Thousands are being culled as we speak due to perceived overpopulation problems. So why are scientists trying to bring back more of these animals when their cousins are being blasted out of their homes? It doesn't make sense, and we need to focus our efforts on protecting animals that are already here.
I get that. Just to say, a rat, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is a small rodent. The noun can mean also an unpleasant person who deceives others or is not loyal. And you guys think that's unfair to rats, and you want it redesignated and redescribed. And I don't know if James Cagney would appreciate with you, you know, because I think when he was going, "You dirty rat, you dirty rat," I don't think that he was really wanting anybody kind or nice coming to him or whatever, but that's historic film.
Well, look, this is a completely friendly request, and we want to encourage everyone to respect all animals. Rats are lovely creatures, they're intelligent, and they're actually very clean. So, you know, this was a friendly request to the Oxford Dictionary, just to right a simple wrong.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Yesterday, a protest criticising the ruling of the Supreme Court was held in London. Others were held across the country. GB News actually went down to the one in the capital to hear from both sides of the argument, as we always do with any debate. However, some of the protesters there weren't so keen on GB News and free speech. One of our members of staff was assaulted by a protester. This has been reported to the Metropolitan Police, as well as accusations of harassment from two people down there who were attempting to obstruct GB News journalists carrying out their job. They did ask for help from the coppers down there, but they weren't very helpful, to say the least, despite witnessing some of the above. However, we did manage to speak to a few people there. Here's what they had to say.
What exactly do you want?
Trans women are women.
Do you want trans women in single-sex spaces? Is that what it is?
I think they should be wherever they want to be.
Exactly.
The new legislations saying that trans women aren't women are like diabolical. So I'm just here to basically say that we're not going to take that.
Why are you here today? What rights are you fighting for?
Everyone's.
Trans rights?
Yeah, everyone.
What specific rights do you want?
Equal rights for everyone.
Tell me why you're here today.
Well, I booked tickets to London Dungeon, and me and my friend are having a little wander around, so just thought I'd see the old Parliament, you know. I support everyone's right to live, yeah. I don't know, I think it's just important to be open-minded, you know.
I don't know if it's free speech to say that I think that some of those sunglasses should be banned. Anyway, to discuss more of the reaction from this week's ruling is political commentator and university student Connie Shaw and journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Welcome to the show, both of you. Connie, you're a little bit younger than... I'm not saying that Ben as well, but you're a little bit younger than us. What's the reaction been amongst students?
Yeah, so the morning after the ruling, I opened up Instagram and it was a flood of pro-trans posts, mainly from predominantly women, young women that I go to university with. Some of it was quite amusing. I saw one post, so there were students individually, but also university societies coming out and saying that they condemn transphobia and the ruling. One of the funniest ones was Bristol's Doctor Who Society said that they said no to transphobia.
I'm a member.
Some of it was very amusing, but what was quite alarming was that I mean, you could see from that clip there that some of these young people clearly have absolutely no understanding of what was happened. They believe that there was a new law passed or a new act passed to say that trans women aren't women. They don't understand that this Supreme Court ruling is an interpretation of what the law has always been. They've just stated what the law has always been. But the way that people were posting it felt very similar to the reaction after when George Floyd died. And one of the posts that I saw actually said that trans people will die as a result of this ruling. So it is quite concerning that, on one hand, there is absolute hysteria, but also just complete misunderstanding about what's happened.
So do you think that young people, Benjamin, are overreacting here? Do you think that it's just that they don't understand the issues? Do you think that they can understand the issues eventually?
Well, I think it's interesting that Connie says that it was a lot of young women, because often this is presented as though women have only one view on it, which is against, when that's simply, you know, not the experience of my female friends. And I think they're compassionate. They care about the idea that, you know, if they're Connie's age, if they're Gen Z, I hate Gen Z as a saying, if they're Gen Z and they're at university, well, then they're more likely to have friends who are transgender or non-binary. This is more likely to be people they know in their lives. And if you go back a generation, maybe to when you were young, if you went to university, you would have had people that were coming out as gay in numbers that you just hadn't seen before, because there was a cultural change. And that led to a domino effect of people being more tolerant and more open-minded to gay men and women living their lives. And I think you see that with transgender people now, because the threat is removed when they're your friends and not just something you see in the media.
Well, this is it. It's framing it in terms of compassion, and it's understandable. Everybody, no one wants anybody to feel threatened, to feel attacked. So you have a whole generation, really, who genuinely seem to believe that this is the eradication of trans people, that they are suddenly now on the precipice, when all that's really been established, Connie, is that women in law means biological women.
And I think sometimes, I mean, what you were saying, Benjamin, about these people just have compassion, that they might have a lot of trans friends. Of course, that might be the case. The reason why I changed my mind, I used to be one of those students when I was at school. I really did believe that trans women were women. I didn't understand what any of the fuss was about. And it was actually through talking to trans people that I realised there was something going on here that wasn't quite right and didn't really align with what I thought feminism was moving away from. I do wonder what it is that these young women in particular don't see about, does it not occur to them that there's a reason why the Equality Act protects sex as a characteristic? Because after all, it is because we are female as women that we have faced oppression, and it is the false stereotypes that have been imposed on us. So how can they not see? And lots of these women would call themselves unequivocally feminists. So I would like to ask, you know, when it comes to women who've been raped, do you not think that they deserve to have single-sex spaces and shouldn't be harassed for saying, actually, I don't want this male person, it's not about the way that you identify, it's just the fact that you're male. I don't think you should be able to come into this space where I need to be around only other females to recover. How can they not see that?
And then, of course, to accuse that of bigotry. I have younger people in my life who I love, who, frankly, think my position on this is bigotry. Whereas, as Connie says, all we're really trying to fight for is for biological women to have their spaces protected. Do you think that younger people... There's always talk about this being almost like cult-like, but do you think that now this has been so clearly laid out in law that there might be the chance of this generation moving forward, Benjamin?
But I don't think moving forward would be to change their mind on this. You know, every generation has cultural watersheds where
But if they think a male rapist should be in a female jail, then that for me feels like there is no right or... I mean, there's a very clear moral and legal position on that. So how are this generation going to get to that point to see that these issues are real and need to be discussed, rather than just shouting bigot at somebody for saying it?
Well, I don't know that they would think that in that example. And also the reason the Equality Act always had this protection, which has now been emphasised, was for places like refuges and rapists. That was why it was there.
But they weren't utilising it, though.
But no, and that was, you know, it kind of got out of control. And I certainly don't think that a trans woman in women's sport is fair, because there's just no getting round the likely difference in physicality in 99% of cases. But the idea that this means that people just trying to lead their lives will be undermined, and that basic tasks they're going about, like simply using the loo in a shopping centre, will be difficult. That is why a lot of transgender people are worried. You know, they didn't ask for this fight. And think about it. You know, they were always using the toilet. They were always using changing rooms. 20 years ago, when the gender recognition certificate was passed, so the certificate that makes you legally change your sex, those women, or those trans men in the other direction, have been living like this for decades without this debate, without people fear-mongering about their existence.
Do you think part of the problem, and is that everybody who talks about this has a different picture in their brain of who exactly we're talking about here? Because I know trans people in my life, and we spoke to Katie earlier, living their life as a woman. Some people will think of that image. Some people, though, the reality is that 95% of what is now termed trans people, which used to be called transvestites, have this sexual fetish, autogynephilia. then other people, that's what they're thinking about when trans people are talked about?
Yes, and I think we do need to recognise, Benjamin, that what was meant by transsexual 10, 20 years ago is very different, and that's why the term has now changed to transgender. It's a very, very broad category. And what lots of people think, and the way that the Equality Act had been misinterpreted, is that some people think that self-ID was the law, that if someone says that they are a woman, then that means that they do have access. But that was never the law. But going back to the student thing and about universities and about this being almost a cult-like thing. One of the most concerning things that I saw, a statement that was put out by the University of Dundee's Student Association, which is their student union. Every student at the University of Dundee is automatically enrolled. It's not an opt-in system. They put a statement out saying that not only do they unequivocally, they're saddened by the ruling, but they said that they would continue to support the right of students to self-identify, i.e. they are essentially saying in this statement that they are willing to continue breaking the law. Now, I don't think that student unions should be putting out any political statement because they are meant to be representing all students. I know that there are students at the University of Dundee who are very happy about the ruling and women who do want to have single sexes within university. And so that's also very concerning, the fact that students now at Dundee have basically been told, if you agree with this ruling and you do think that single-sex services should exist, then your student union will not support or represent you. And so if you're having your own body that is meant to, a bit like the University and College Union and the General Secretary Joe Grady going out and saying that they'll always stand with trans people and trans rights, which in this case does mean basically the males who say that they're women going into women-only spaces, they've made it very clear to those members who want to have their sex-based rights protected that they will not stand by them. So when
it was actually worse than that, because she put out a post on X where she was talking about hate, and yet one of the photos, Benjamin, was a photo saying kill TERFs. So there's been a hypocrisy here, and also there's been this idea that it's this toxic debate, but I would say that 99.9% of this toxicity that I've seen and certainly threats of violence has been coming very much, it's been in one direction towards these mostly left-wing lesbian middle-aged women.
Well, I mean, the debate is hideous, and it's been hideous for years. It's incredibly toxic, it's incredibly irrational at times, it doesn't listen to the other side. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult and so sensitive is because there is obviously, as Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has often said for some years now, there's obviously no doubt that male violence is a problem, is an epidemic in our society, and that women in private spaces feel the threat of that male pressure. That is real. What's also the case is that people that have gender dysphoria, that experience the idea that their body and their identity are fundamentally in conflict, often feel that from a young age. It is more difficult than we can imagine. You know, I'm a gay man, so I have a certain insight to it, and I can't imagine what it's like to feel like you're in the wrong body. And their lives are hard enough without feeling like the weight of the state and the weight of most of the media is on them when they're just trying to understand themselves. And so it's no wonder that they end up being defensive. But the toxicity of this whole thing has helped absolutely nobody. And I just point out, you know, Stonewall before 2010, which was very close to the new Labour government, didn't deal with trans issues. But I know many of the people that ran Stonewall at that time, and they will say the way we did it was by talking to each other and sitting down and listening. And eventually we worked out questions you never imagined being able to answer, like eventually getting same-sex marriage. Shouting at each other never solved anything.
Well, it was worse than shouting, wasn't it? Because Stonewall became
no debate.
So, I mean, this is so... It's so sad that so much of the toxicity came from this... When you hold people up and say you cannot talk about this, and if you are, we've seen so many women lose their jobs, being abused. Do you think that we are going to finally be able to now move forward from this? Because, unfortunately, what I've seen over the last 24 hours just suggests not.
Whatever has happened in the last 24 hours, it still stands that the Supreme Court ruled that under the Equality Act, biological sex is sex refers to biological sex, and it doesn't matter whether you have a piece of paper. So, yes, there might be lots of protests, but it is still the case that that is the law. In terms of moving forward in young people, I don't know I think about it all the time because I want to try and convince young women that it's not unkind to say that women have boundaries and that it is OK to have single-sex spaces and exclude male people, no matter how they identify. I don't know what the way is forward, but these university students have been taught that it is a really nasty thing to say that actually I don't want trans women in my spaces, or even I don't think that trans women are women or another step, I think trans women are men. And people think that is so awful to say it. Even though it's a protected view, it's illegal to discriminate against someone for saying it. I don't know what it's going to take to get more young women to at least engage, because I think also when you have taken part in what you feel like you're taking part in a mass movement of resisting bad things and people having their rights taken away, if you even see a slight glance of something that might think, oh, the first thing you want to do is think, well, no, I don't want to listen to that, because if it makes someone change your mind, if it makes you change your mind, that can be quite an embarrassing thing. I remember when I first started to realise, actually, I don't agree with this, I almost felt really embarrassed. Like, how can I admit to people that this isn't what I think anymore? If you've been running with it for so long, you know, we need to teach people that there's humility in changing your mind, and it is OK to read the other side. I think people are scared of reading the other side because they'll see something that basically shows them that what they have been preaching is not right.
Well, we'll see. Well, having conversations like this, of course, that is the start. Thank you, both of you, for joining me. Benjamin Butterworth, Connie Shaw, thank you very, very much. Big round of applause for them. That's how we move forward. Let's talk about it. So, coming up after the break, we are going to be speaking to Jean Hatchett and this incredibly traumatic experience that we saw online. See you in a couple of minutes.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too, though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England. They'll ease overnight though, leaving some mist and fog patches here as we go into the early hours of Monday. Whereas out towards the west, the showers across Northern Ireland will start to make inroads across other western parts of the UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we can see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be merging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just one or two showers around. Then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So a wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down, though, as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Writer Jean Hatchett has been to yesterday's trans protest in Sheffield. She went there to support women's rights and she was allegedly assaulted by a member of that protest. So we'll look at a clip.
Enjoyed posting a picture of me on Twitter, didn't you, though?
No, I didn't.
Oh, really?
So why? You know who I am?
I do know who you are.
All right,
yeah.
I know who you are.
Really? So why did you post my picture on Twitter then?
I've absolutely no idea.
So why did you? Why did you?
She also was told by police to move on to a different part of the protest.
I can stop you going up there to if I believe you can cause trouble.
This is just the suffragette flag, though. Why would that offend anyone? Why would it offend anyone?
What is it you're saying? Offended by it, or people don't like it, you cause trouble. And I think, you know what I'm saying? I can stop you wasn't around going up there. What I'm saying is, can you just go down there and make your point?
I'm now joined by Jean herself. Jean, welcome to the show. Hello, look at you, glamorous. This is your non-protest outfit.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little bit tired today and a little bit overwhelmed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the clips that we didn't show there was I would argue, was more traumatising in terms of just people really getting up in your face, just the shouting at you, the abuse. And I'm sorry, let's go back to the beginning. So what happened? You saw that there would be this protest and you decided to go along.
Yeah, I think a few women felt, you know, we knew, in fact, that the judgment was not going to be the end of things, that there would be a backlash. And because there has been such, you know, such viciousness towards women for so many years that there was no way that that judgment would drop and then the viciousness would go away. So when we saw that something was being organised in protest, we went along to it's an act of defiance, really, and just to scratch the surface and show what's actually there and what does not go away. And, you know, these are violent and lawless men, you know, driving quite young children in some, you know, from what we saw and what we always see. They're quite impressionable children. But the people in my face were older men. And, you know, we know that they dislike women intensely, and that is not going to have gone away. So we went along to see what it was, you know, what it was all about.
Well, this is it. I mean, this is what we've seen, unfortunately, from so much of the last few years, were men telling women what they were, what they weren't. And it wasn't just at this protest in Sheffield. There are various placards from across the country calling for the death of women, calling for violence towards women. And what's incredible is to see the police response to that. We did a feature earlier on two-tier policing. I don't know how many people actually were arrested for these outrageous calls for violence towards women.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really been part of the two-tier policing debate. I've not been asked much about it, but that is what I saw yesterday, because they were all over the public building, the town hall. It's, you know, public right of access, and I said, right, I'm walking my suffragette flag back through there. I have the right to do it. I am not going to be cowed by these bullies who've assaulted my partner. They've assaulted me, and I have the right to walk one flag, one women's rights flag, through their hundreds of flags in a public space that is a democratic place, and they would not let me pass. The police would not let me pass. So I asked them, why can I not walk where everyone is allowed to walk? Why can I not do that? And they said, because we think it will be a breach of the peace. And I said, who will breach that peace? Because I've never hurt anyone. And they said, we fear that well, they were very unclear at first, and then they confirmed for me, they feared for me and for the people I was with. There were only a handful of us. You know, we didn't organise a great protest. It was just, you know, let's go along and take a few flags. They'd already stolen virtually everything we had, and they had assaulted a number of us. I'm covered in bruises, actually. I didn't realise at the time, but, you know, we've looked at my arms. People have grabbed me very hard. My partner's, she had her face injured from people punching her, and she's had a headache all day.
And have the police actually arrested anybody from that? Sorry, have they come and taken a report from you? Have they taken any video footage? So a woman can be punched in the face, and this actually is what I saw years ago, which sort of opened my eyes to what was going on here. Were in this case it was men beating women and somehow being celebrated for it, and not being seen that is where the hate is coming from. You standing there with a suffragette flag, surely that isn't hateful.
It wasn't hateful, and we hadn't made speeches, we hadn't been noisy, we had simply held our flags, and one of them was the symbol of the lesbian resistance, the Labris flag, and that had been stolen from a lesbian woman. So, you know, the violence was quite incredible, and they were really shouting, really in our faces, and it became quite terrifying. actually. But when I started to say to the police officer who was trying to move me away for my safety, and I said, but this guy here, this bloke, because he was a bloke, he had a wig on and lipstick, but still a man, was pushing his body into mine, his crotch into my sides. And I said, this guy is assaulting me. And the police officer said, we don't want to offend anyone, though. He was talking about my use of language about a man. And so he was more concerned with me and the way that I was calling men than he was with what was happening to me in front of him. And that was deeply, deeply shocking.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for it. And again, seeing some of the clips and seeing you being so brave in the face of the hate was visceral, apart from the physical thing, but just the shouting, the screaming, 1,000 people all focused on you for being able to just stand there and say, look, women are biological women. I thought it was incredibly brave. I am so sorry that your partner and you got hurt. But I think going there and unfortunately exposing what happened is terrible but necessary. So thank you very much for coming on the show as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
OK, GB News has approached South Yorkshire Police for comment. Thank you for joining us for this historical Free Speech Nation. See you next week, and thank you so much for all of the guests this evening. Have a great weekend.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we'll see a mixed bag of weather. Most places seeing some warm sunshine, some showery rain too though, and things starting to quieten down later on in the week. Low pressure sitting towards the south and west of the UK at the moment. That's starting to feed some showers in across southern and western parts of the UK. And certainly as we head into the evening, we'll see further showers across the south and southeast of England. They'll ease overnight though, leaving some mist and fog patches here as we go into the early hours of Monday. Whereas out towards the west, the showers across Northern Ireland will start to make inroads across other western parts of the UK, starting to turn heavier and more widespread here as we head into the early hours. Clearer skies are likely up towards the northeast. Here we can see a patchy frost, but elsewhere it's a pretty mild night to come. So we start Monday then with some brightness up towards the north and northeast of Scotland. It's mostly fine here at this stage of the day. Whereas towards the southwest of the country, a few showers are likely. As we head into Northern Ireland, the showers will be merging to give some more persistent spells of rain and some quite persistent outbreaks moving their way in across the Irish Sea into parts of Wales and the southwest of England too. Whereas towards the southeast of England, again, it's mostly fine here to start the day on Monday with a few bright spells in places. As we go through the rest of Easter Monday, that band of rain will progress eastwards and northeastwards across the UK, so most places will start to see some outbreaks of rain as we go through the day. Notice towards the south and west, those skies do start to brighten, but that will also allow some showers to break out. Some of those could well turn heavy, even thundery in nature in places. So it's the southwest seeing the best of the brightness later on in the afternoon. Temperatures not doing too badly, up to 16 or 17 Celsius in some of the sunny spells. And as we head into Tuesday, rain is more confined towards the northeast of the UK. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine, just one or two showers around. But then notice later in the day, further rain starts to move in across Ireland. And that heralds a pretty wet night to come across some southern parts of the UK as we go into Wednesday. So wet start in the south on Wednesday. Things starting to quieten down though as we go through the rest of the week with more in the way of sunshine developing.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest